Hello. In today's video, I'm going to answer your questions on what is the difference between by and with. So, to start with, I have some questions. I want you to think which ones are correct and which ones are not correct. I also want you to think about which sentences are correct and which sentences are incorrect. Why are they correct and why are they incorrect? So my first sentence, I learn English by watching Watch It. Compare this to, I learn English with watching Watch It. Which one do you think is the correct form? Do we use by or do we use with? If you said, I learn English by watching Watch It, you are correct. Okay? And I will explain why in the next part of this video. So what about the next two? I write with a pen and I write by a pen. Which one do you think is the correct sentence and which one is incorrect? And why? If you said, I write with a pen, you are correct. So, before we talk about some of the differences, let's talk about the similarities. How are by and with the same? Well, they both answer the question, how? How do you learn English? I learn English by watching Watch It. I learn English by reading my dictionary every night. I learn English by talking to people. So, that's answering how you do something. Similarly, with, it also answers the question, how? How do you write? Well, I write with a pen. How do you eat dinner? I eat dinner with a fork, or I eat dinner with chopsticks. So they both answer the same question. How? But they are a little bit different. So let's look at these differences now. So let's look at some example sentences with by. I turn on the computer by pushing the on button. This is, again, answering the question. How? How do you turn on the computer? Well, I turn on the computer by pushing the on button. I want you to take a moment to look at this sentence. What comes after by? We have here pushing. Pushing is a verb. So, after by, we often have a verb when we're explaining how something is done. Let's look at another example. I keep healthy by exercising. So again, after by, you will notice we have a verb. Exercise. In this case, it's exercising. So one of the first things to notice is that after by, we often have a verb. I have here by plus verb, but that's not all. If you look at the verb, what form is the verb in? We'll take a moment. What do pushing and exercising have in common? They both end in ing. So we use by, and after by comes a verb, and then it ends with ing. For example, how do you keep clean? I keep clean by showering. How do you study? I study by reading over my notes. So after by, we have the verb and ing. So let's do one together. I learned karate by YouTube. What do you think the verb would be? We could say by watch. Is that right? By watch YouTube? No, we need the ing. Perfect. I learned karate by watching YouTube. So again, this is very useful because anytime you are explaining how, if you have a verb and by, then you can explain how you do something. Now let's look at some more differences between with and by. So before I begin teaching you more about by and with, I just want to say that these are the general rules, and there are always times in English when rules are broken or when there are exceptions. These are the most basic rules for using by and with. Now let's look at when we are talking about a noun. We have just talked about using by with a verb ending in ing to answer how to do something. Well, we can also talk by using a noun. To remind you, a noun is usually a person, a place, a thing, or maybe an idea. Let's look at some examples. Oh, before we get to the examples, one of the major rules when it comes to by is that we often use it with communication. When we are talking about how we communicate, we usually use by. We also use by a lot when talking about transportation. There are other exceptions, but the main ones I want you to know for now are communication and transportation. For example, I will contact you by email. Email is an example of a noun, and email is a form of communication. We can change this to, I will contact you by phone. I will contact you by messenger. Or, I will message you by text. So again, these are communication-based examples. Then we use by for transportation when we are talking about nouns. So what are some examples of nouns for transportation? We have buses, subways, bikes, boats, airplanes, ferries, motorcycles, taxis, Ubers. These are all forms of transportation, and they are all nouns. So we can use by when we are talking about these nouns. I will go by bus. I came by car. You will also notice something. When we use by and we're using a noun, we don't usually have the article there. So I don't say, I will go by a bus or I came by a car. It's usually without any article. I will go by bus. I will go by subway. I will go by airplane. I will go by bike. So again, we often use by with nouns when we are talking about communication or transportation. There are some other times we talk about them, and various exceptions, but this is the main rule. So now let's talk about with. Just like by, with answers the same question. How do you do something? So the question is, how? I have here some examples. How do Italians talk? Well, you know, they talk in different ways, but Italians talk with their hands. How do you point? I point with my fingers. So these are some examples with. When we were talking about by, we looked at by, followed by a verb and followed by nouns. We talked about how the nouns usually have to do with communication or transportation. With, we usually use it with a noun. So again, a noun is a person, place, or thing. Like hands is a noun, fingers is a noun, and we usually use with. And again, I'm saying usually because there are a lot of other cases we use it, but this is the main rule. We use with body parts when we are talking about tools or different instruments. So, for example, Italians talk with their hands. So we have with here, and we have a body part. Hands. Maybe you know, people who are deaf often talk with their hands. I point with my fingers. I point with my toes. Okay? So again, we have another body part. Fingers. I think with my brain. I smile with my teeth and lips. I run with my legs. Okay? So we use it for body parts. We can also use it when we're talking about tools or instruments. So when I'm talking about instruments, I'm talking about things we use. I cleaned the floor. How? How did you clean the floor? Well, I cleaned the floor with a mop. So a mop is like a tool or an instrument. You can say, I cleaned the floor with a broom. I cleaned the floor with a dustpan. I ate dinner with a fork. So this is answering. How did you eat dinner? I ate dinner with chopsticks. I ate dinner with a spoon. How did you cook? I cooked with a microwave. I cooked with a pot. I cooked with an oven. You know, how did you camp? I camped with a tent. So we use this a lot of the time when we are talking about body parts, tools, or instruments, things that help you do things. So we have covered a lot of ground here. We have covered by with verbs, we have covered by with nouns, and we have covered with nouns. So until next time, thank you for watching and take care.